You're a burden, Mom. David's words hung, an invisible guillotine, in the dining room air. I felt my fingers tighten around the casserole dish of beef stew I was holding, the one he'd loved so much since he was a little boy. The heat of the dish against my skin was the only sensation that kept me anchored to reality. 67 years. 67 years of life. And I never imagined hearing that from the boy I'd carried, protected, raised. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, looked at the floor, avoiding my eyes. Arthur kept staring at his tablet, oblivious to the emotional shrapnel his dad had just unleashed. And I stood there, paralyzed, holding the food that was already growing cold. Because it's just... Mom, it's complicated to have you along. You're a burden, always needing a ride, needing attention, asking, everything. Brian just wanted something laid back. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just placed the casserole dish on the table and said, I understand. Go on then. Enjoy the party. I wouldn't want to be a burden. Mom, it's not like that. You're misunderstanding. David tried to backtrack, but it was too late. You must be wondering how we got here. How my own son, flesh and blood, could reduce me to this. A burden, an imposition. It all started 3 months earlier when I went for my routine checkup. The doctor said my blood pressure was a little high. Nothing serious, but that I needed to take care of myself. I started asking David for rides to my monthly appointments, the clinic conveniently close to his office. At first, no complaints. Just those telltale sighs when I'd mention a date. Mom, can't you just catch an Uber? He asked once. I could, honey, but I'm stretching every dollar. My pension barely covers the bills and my meds, I replied, immediately feeling guilty for mentioning money. David is 42, a marketing manager at a cosmetics company. Jessica, 39, works with corporate events. They live in a beautiful gated community, have 2 cars in the garage, and travel abroad once a year. I've lived alone since Anthony, my husband, passed away 8 years ago. My apartment is small but cozy, bought with his pension and savings from a lifetime of working as a teacher. I'd made sure, always, not to be a bother. When Arthur was born, I offered to watch him a few days a week so they could save on a sitter. I'd make Sunday dinners, pack them leftovers for the week. During school breaks, Arthur would stay with me. I'd take him to the park, teach him how to make cookies, tell him stories. He loved it. But lately, a shift. Visits grew shorter, phone calls thinner. When they did come, Jessica's gaze was glued to her phone. David's patience seemed threadbare. Arthur, at 8, had found his true companion in a tablet, not me. Grandma, your Wi-Fi's so slow. Don't you have anything faster? He asked during one visit, frustrated because his game kept freezing. I just smiled. Said no, dear. That was the speed my budget allowed. He scrunched up his face and went back to the sofa, uninterested in the origami figures I'd prepared to teach him. The week before my birthday, I called David to confirm if they were coming. Of course, Mom. It's your birthday, he replied, but there was a strained note in his voice, leaving me uneasy. I spent the week planning lunch. I went to the farmer's market on Wednesday, bought flowers on Thursday, cleaned the house on Friday. On Saturday, the day before my birthday, I prepared the cake batter. On Sunday, I woke up at 6 in the morning to start the beef stew, the potato salad, set the table with my crocheted tablecloth. At 3 in the afternoon, when they were supposed to arrive, I started getting anxious. I called David. We're just leaving, Mom, he said in that hurried voice I knew so well. They arrived almost at 5. Arthur ran in, gave me a quick hug. and went straight for his tablet. Jessica barely smiled, busy on her phone. David wore that expression of someone fulfilling an obligation. "Mom, can we just do the cake? We've got somewhere else we need to be," he said while I was still serving lunch. That's when Arthur, innocently, revealed the truth. "Dad, what time are we going to Uncle Brian's party?" Brian, David's younger brother, the boy I helped raise when my sister-in-law got sick. The one I baked birthday cakes for years. The one I saved money for to help with the down payment on his first apartment. And now, a new house? An important milestone, and I was completely in the dark. "What party?" The words tasted flat, like the rice I was serving onto my son's barely touched plate. "It's nothing, Mom. Just a little barbecue," David replied, visibly uncomfortable. "At Uncle Brian's new house. There's gonna be a pool and a bounce house." Arthur continued, oblivious to the tension. "Why didn't you tell me about your own brother's party?" The question caught in my throat, and then came the phrase that changed everything. "Because it's just complicated to have you along, Mom. You're a burden." After they left, I was left alone with a half-eaten cake and a house full of food. I sat on the sofa and for the first time in many years, allowed myself to cry without worrying about looking strong. Tears streamed hot down my wrinkled face. I looked at my hands. Hands that had cradled 2 children, graded thousands of papers, sustained a family for decades. Hands that now, apparently, only served to weigh others down. I recalled when David, a boy terrified of thunder, would scramble into my bed, nestling close. "Mom, don't let the noise get me," he'd whisper, and I'd hold him tight, promising forever protection. I remembered when he had pneumonia at 12, and I spent 2 weeks sleeping in a chair next to his hospital bed. How I'd even sold my wedding jewelry to seed his first business, which crumbled 6 months later. You're a burden. That night stretched endlessly. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment, every sacrifice, every choice. When the sun began to rise, I was already sitting on the edge of the bed. A chilling clarity settled over me, a feeling I'd never known. I picked up the phone and called Olga, my water aerobics friend who always invited me on trips with the senior group. "Is there still a spot for Palm Springs?" I heard myself ask. "Barbara, what a surprise. Yes, we have 2 spots, but you always said you couldn't go because of your grandson." "Things have changed, Olga. I'm going." Next, I called the real estate agency. I scheduled a visit to Sunstone Place, that independent living community I'd always just noticed. Passing by. It had always seemed like a distant dream. Small but modern apartments with daily activities, an on-call nurse, and most importantly, a community. That morning, I also took out the box where I kept my keepsakes. Old photos, Mother's Day cards. David made in school, Bruno's little crocheted booties I made myself when he was born. I looked at each item, allowing myself to feel the pain and love each one represented. 3 days passed without a word from them. I had already packed for the trip and signed the contract with the real estate agency to rent out my apartment. The rent, combined with my pension, would allow me to live at Sunstone Place and still have a little left over for small luxuries. A new book now and then, an ice cream at the park, maybe even painting classes. When the phone rang and I saw David's name on the screen, my heart sped up. Part of me was still that mother anxious to hear her son's voice. "I'm calling to say I'm so sorry, Mom," he began. "I'm sorry too, honey. But you did me a favor. You showed me it was time to live my life, not yours." "What do you mean? What are you going to do?" "I'm leaving tomorrow. When I get back, I'm moving into Sunstone Place, that independent living community I always mentioned. I've rented out my apartment. The silence on the other end, heavy with unspoken expectations, was all the answer I needed. But Mom, what if we need you to watch Arthur? And what about Sunday dinners? Honey, I paused, letting the words sink in. People who are a burden shouldn't be responsible for children, should they? And as for Sunday dinners, well, burdens don't cook, do they? I hung up the phone feeling a mix of pain and liberation. His words on my birthday had broken something inside me, but they had also broken chains I didn't even know I was carrying. The next morning, when the tour bus pulled up to my door, my stomach did a nervous flip. It was the first time in years I'd be traveling alone, without worrying about anyone else's schedule but my own. Olga was waiting for me with a wide smile. Ready for an adventure, Barbara? I paused at the curb, looking back at my apartment building, at the window where I'd raised my children, where Anthony and I had built a life, where I'd spent so many quiet nights after he left. More than you can imagine, Olga. As the bus pulled away, my cell phone vibrated. It was a text from David. Mom, can we talk when you get back? Please. I didn't answer immediately. I put my phone in my purse and looked out the window, watching the city disappear behind us. That please was a new currency. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different from now on. But not on my old terms, on the new ones, which I was just beginning to discover. The bus continued down the road, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't a burden. I was simply Barbara, 67, charting a new course with a suitcase full of fresh possibilities. What I didn't know at that moment was that this trip was merely the prologue to a far grander transformation than I could have conceived. And that my son's painful words, while they'd torn me open, had ultimately become the spark for the most astonishing chapter of my life. But what happened next changed everything. That trip to a wellness retreat in Arizona, well, it felt like diving into unknown waters. Terrifying at first, but then incredibly freeing. On the bus, Olga introduced me to the group. Margaret, a 72-year-old widow who danced up a storm like a teenager. Sebastian, a spry 75-year-old who'd started hiking after 70. And Helen, a retired teacher just like me, who now sold her paintings at craft fairs. Do you all travel together often? I asked, sharing some cookies and coffee during a rest stop. At least 3 times a year, Helen replied. We started after my son moved to Canada. It was either stay home and cry, or find something to do with my life. Her words really hit home. Throughout the trip, I watched them laugh, tell stories, make plans. They didn't seem like burdens to anyone. They were people living life to the fullest despite their age, despite their empty nests. In the hot springs pool, its warmth seeping into my weary bones, brought a clarity so vivid it stole my breath. I remembered a conversation with my own mother, shortly before she passed. Barbara, don't make the same mistake I did, she'd said, holding my hand from her hospital bed. I lived for everyone else and forgot to live for myself. By the time I realized, it was too late. At the time, I just thought it was the rambling of a woman at death's door. But now, floating in that warm water, I understood it was a warning, a wisdom I'd ignored for decades. That night, in the quiet solitude of my hotel room, I picked up my phone and finally typed out my reply to David. Yes, son, we can talk. But know this, it will be a conversation unlike any we've ever had. The 7 days at the resort flew by like a dream. I went into every pool, participated in all the activities, danced with a nice gentleman named Gerald, and even went on a gentle hike with the group. Each night I'd sink into bed, a good satisfying exhaustion replacing the weary ache I'd carried home after thankless Sunday dinners. When I got back, my apartment was already being prepped for the tenants. I had 1 week to move into the Oaks Senior Living. David called as soon as he heard I was back. "Mom, I need to see you. Can I come over? Now?" "I'm buried in moving boxes, honey. How about Sunday? You could come help me get some of them to the new place?" The silence on the other end of the line told me everything. He expected me to yield, to rush back into my old life at the sound of his contrite voice. "All right," he finally replied. "I'll be there Sunday. Can I bring Arthur?" Of course, it'll be good for him to see where Grandma's going to live. In the days that followed, I dove into the task of deciding what to take to my new life. The apartment at the Oaks was smaller, but it had everything I needed. A comfy bedroom, a small living area, a functional kitchen, and a balcony with space for some plants. The community offered meals in the communal dining room, but I could cook whenever I wanted. While sorting through clothes, dishes, and mementos, I found a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the notebooks where I'd jotted down recipes and thoughts. I opened one, dated when David was 16. Today, David said I'm the best mom in the world. I made his favorite dinner to celebrate him getting into college. Anthony complained about the private college tuition, but I sold my gold bracelets to help. My son deserves nothing less, and I would make any sacrifice for him. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding that yellowed notebook. How did we fall from the best mom in the world to a burden? When did my boundless sacrifices become an irksome obligation? I remembered another episode when David was 22 and totaled the car Anthony had worked so hard to buy. My husband was furious, but I defended our boy. "It was just an accident, Anthony. He's still finding his way." "You always coddle him, Barbara. He'll never learn to stand on his own." Anthony was right. I'd protected David so much that maybe I'd prevented him from developing empathy, from understanding the value of someone else's sacrifice. On Sunday, precisely at 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. Arthur burst through the door, throwing his arms around me with an eager intensity I hadn't felt in years. "Grandma, I brought you a present," he said, handing me a drawing that looked like him and me holding hands. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'll hang it in my new room." David came in right after, looking uncomfortable. Jessica hadn't come. She had an engagement, he said. "Mom, this move, I don't think it's necessary." I motioned to the sofa for us to sit. Arthur asked to explore the apartment, and I allowed it. "Son, necessity has nothing to do with it. This is about choice. For the first time in decades, I'm choosing for myself." "But this place is for seniors who need care. You're fine, independent. The Oaks is for people like me. Independent, yes, but craving companionship, engagement, a true community. Did you know they have painting, choir, even dance? All the things I longed to do, but never had a moment for when I was busy taking care of everyone else." David looked away, visibly uncomfortable with the thinly veiled criticism. "About what I said on your birthday." "I didn't mean it, Mom. I was just drowning in work and bills." "But you did say it, son. And perhaps you needed to, just as I needed to hear it." I got up and went to the bookshelf, pulling down a photo album. I opened it to a page with a picture of David at 5, sitting on my lap. "Remember that day?" You'd fallen at the playground and scraped your knee. You cried so hard I thought you'd broken your leg. I carried you 3 blocks home, even with my back aching. That day, you weren't a burden. You were my son, cherished above all else. I flipped a few pages and showed him another photo. Teenage David getting the keys to his first car. Your dad and I saved for 2 years to buy that car. I cleaned houses for my fellow teachers on weekends to earn extra. You weren't a burden when you first hit the road, that grin plastered ear to ear. David had tears in his eyes now. Mom, Let me finish, son. When you and Jessica needed help with baby Arthur, I was there. When you lost your job 5 years ago and needed money for rent, I was there. Never at any point did I consider you or your needs a burden. I closed the album and put it back on the shelf. But now I understand that maybe that was a mistake. By trying to shield you from every hardship, I inadvertently created a son who now perceives his mother as a burden the moment she, finally, asks for a little of that attention back. David was openly weeping now. That's not what I meant, Mom. You've never been a burden. I was just being selfish. Brian's party was just an excuse. The truth is, I've neglected you. And when you asked for something, I felt guilty, and I turned that guilt into irritation. Arthur ran back into the living room, interrupting our conversation. Grandma, does your new apartment have a pool? Maria at my school has a pool. It does, sweetheart. And it also has a game room where we can play checkers and dominoes when you visit me. His eyes lit up. Can I sleep over at your new place sometimes? I looked at David, who was discreetly wiping his tears. If your dad allows it, of course you can. In the following weeks, I completed my move to the Oaks. My small apartment soon came alive with my plants, a few hand-picked pieces of furniture, and the photos that truly mattered. On the main wall, I hung Arthur's drawing. The adjustment wasn't easy. There were nights I cried, missing my old life, the comfort of the familiar routine. But each morning brought new possibilities. I started attending painting classes, discovering a talent I didn't even know I had. I joined the walking group that trekked through the nearby park 3 times a week. I made friends, real friendships, based on common interests and mutual respect, not family obligations. A month after the move, I received a surprise visit. It was Brian, David's brother, with his wife Denise and their 12-year-old twins. Aunt Barbara, he began, the childhood honorific sounding a little too small in the spacious new living area. We came to see your new place. I served coffee and cake on my small balcony. Brian looked uncomfortable. David told me what happened about the party at my house. I want you to know you were always invited. I texted him to bring you. That hurt more than I expected. It wasn't just an oversight, but a deliberate cold shoulder. It's all right, Brian. Sometimes a little distance offers the clearest view. But it's not all right, he insisted, his voice rough. You were more of a mother to me than... Well, you know, when Mom would get indisposed. He made air quotes, a shadow crossing his face. You were the one who stepped in, who went to parent-teacher conferences, who taught me math when no one else would. Denise, his wife, took my hand. Barbara, we want you to know you'll always have a place at our table. And if you ever need anything, a ride to the doctor, company for appointments, we're here. Not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. Those words, so simple yet so sincere, touched my heart in a way I hadn't expected. Maybe I hadn't completely failed as a mother and a maternal figure, after all. 2 weeks later, I received another unexpected visit. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, alone. "May I come in, Miss Barbara?" she asked, her voice tight with nerves. I noticed the Ms. It wasn't Mom, or mother-in-law anymore. It was a formal, distant address. "Of course, Jessica. And please, call me Clara." We sat in the living room, and an awkward silence settled between us. "I came to apologize," Jessica finally said. "For my part in that day. For not standing up for you." "You didn't need to defend me, Clara." "Yes, I did, because I know how much you truly held us together. When Arthur arrived and I sank into postpartum, it was you who was the anchor. When I needed to return to work and full-time care was out of reach, it was you who stepped in." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I always felt dwarfed by you. By the perfect mother David described. By the fiercely devoted grandmother you are. When you showed vulnerability, when you asked for help, it was a shattering reminder that you were human too, with needs of your own. And that terrified me, because it broke the superwoman image I'd constructed." Her words surprised me. I never imagined Jessica saw me that way, or that my requests for help could represent something so complex for her. "I'm not perfect, Jessica. Never was. I made mistakes, especially with David. Perhaps my greatest was not allowing him to stumble, to face the full weight of his own actions. He is changing, you know, since you moved. It's like something inside him has awakened. He's more present with Arthur, less consumed by work. He even tried cooking last weekend. We chuckled together, imagining David in the kitchen, him who always said, 'A man's place isn't at the stove.' Clara," she continued, using my first name for the first time, "I know I can't erase what happened, but I want you to know your move has made us reconsider so much. About family, about growing older, about respect." When she left, I found myself thinking about how complex family relationships are, full of layers of unspoken expectations, of roles assumed without questioning. How stubbornly ingrained decades of established patterns can be. The months passed, and my new life began to take shape. I held my first painting exhibition at the community center. They were just simple landscapes and still lifes, but each painting represented a part of my journey. I invited my family, and to my surprise, everyone came. David, Jessica, Arthur, Brian and his family, even some old colleagues from the school where I used to teach. "I didn't know you painted, Mom," David said, admiring a painting where I had captured the sunset from my balcony. "Neither did I, honey. There's a whole landscape of me I'm only just beginning to explore." Now, Arthur tugged on my hand, leading me to another painting. A playground scene where a grandmother pushed a boy on a swing. "Is that you and me, Grandma?" "Yes, my love. From when you were little and we used to spend afternoons at the park near my old house." "Can we go to that park again someday?" "Of course, sweetheart. But now we have the park right here at the complex, too. And so many other adventures to discover together." That night, after everyone had left, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine. A small luxury I now allowed myself once in a while. Looking at the city lights, I thought about how life takes unexpected turns. David's cruel words that birthday had been a seismic shock, tearing down the very foundations I'd known. But from the rubble, I was constructing something new, something undeniably authentic. I wasn't just David's mother anymore, or Jessica's mother-in-law, or Arthur's grandma. I was Clara, artist, friend, a woman of 67, blooming with desires and dreams all her own. My phone buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was a message from Olga. Travel group meeting tomorrow, 10 a.m. We're planning our trip to the New England coast next fall. Confirm attendance? I smiled, typing quickly. Confirmed. I even have suggestions for charming inns. I put my phone away and continued to gaze at the night. Words, I mused, hold immense power. To wound, yes, but also to liberate. You're a burden, Mom. Had been the push I needed to break free from inertia, to rediscover who I was beyond the family roles I played. Today, 6 months after that fateful birthday, I'm no longer a burden. Not to my family, nor to myself. I'm a woman who carries her own story with dignity, who learns every day that aging doesn't mean disappearing. David and I are still rebuilding our relationship, now on more honest ground. Jessica and I have developed a friendship we never had before. Arthur spends 1 weekend a month with me, and together we explore my new neighborhood. Bake cookies in my small kitchen, and he's even started to show an interest in painting. Sometimes, when I'm in water aerobics with my new friends, or painting a new piece, or simply sunbathing by the community pool, I feel an unexpected gratitude for that painful moment. It took my son branding me a burden for me to finally discover I had wings. And as for burdens, well, I've come to understand we all, at some point, are a weight to someone. The true art lies in also being wings, being support, being light, and possessing the wisdom to discern when to carry and when to truly fly.